linguistics.
Welcome back, Florida Linguistics Podcast listeners. This is the podcast for Monday, April 19th, 2010. I'm Lee Ballard, grad student in linguistics at the University of Florida, and I'm here today with Hicham Chami. Hicham Chami is a Qanun player, and he is here in Gainesville, Florida, to do a residency with his ensemble, the Arabesque Music Ensemble, formerly known as the Chicago Oriental Music Ensemble, correct?
Yeah, that was quite a few years ago, actually.
Okay, but nowadays, Arabesque music, and
Correct.
He's here with some of his colleagues teaching us how to play Arabic music, and we've got a concert actually coming up tomorrow. And I noticed in a couple of our conversations that the Arabic music tradition is endangered, so we're here to talk about endangered music, maybe even how it relates to endangered languages. But I thought maybe we could start out by me asking you what your musical background is, if you could tell us how you grew up playing music and your training.
Okay, well, I did start at an age where you don't necessarily make your own decisions. One day, as I was 7, my dad put that thing in my lap and said, "Go to school." And it was not to my liking, because I was at an age where I would have rather just stayed outside playing soccer like most people my age.
Okay.
But they kind of pushed me to finish, and I did attend the music school back home for 10 years, doing 2 curriculums in parallel. One dedicated to what we know as solfège, straight from the French tradition, basically music theory and history. And the other curriculum was dedicated to playing this fantastic instrument known as the Qanun. What made the difference in between the two paths is that the first one was inherited from the French system. Mm-hmm. So the classrooms are actually classrooms with people sitting behind desks and a blackboard and a professor who would distribute notes with the syllabus, and we knew exactly what we were doing, for how long we were doing it, and right. The classroom was actually from 4:30 to 6:30 or 2:55 to 3:55. Right. And on the other hand, I was attending those Qanun classes that looked just totally different. We're talking about a one-on-one class with your professor, a gentleman who ends up being very much part of your life. Some sort of a father figure, a gentleman with whom you would sit for an indeterminate amount of time. My solfège classes were from 4:30 to 6:30 on a Tuesday. My Qanun classes were on Wednesday evening. That's the best I could get as far as getting close to establishing a schedule. And you would just sit down with that professor of yours, and you'll talk about quite a few things: how you were doing at school, your relationships, your interactions with your parents, and like I said, the gentleman ends up being part of your life in a sense. And the downside to that is that these were not formal classes, which translated into us not receiving what I would call, with all due respect to that time-honored tradition of doing these things verbally. It ended up leading to a situation where we were not receiving proper teachings. Mm-hmm. Why? Because it was up to us students to pick on what the teacher was showing, right, as opposed to him asking you for specific things. There was no methodology, there was no classes to follow. It was just one-on-one interaction, and it was up to the student and his ability to pick up on things to basically make it a worthwhile class or not. Right.
So back home for you, this is in Morocco, correct?
Yes.
And what city in particular?
I'm from the northern part of Morocco, the part that was under Spanish domination for about 40 years. But I grew up in the capital, in Rabat.
Okay. So during your musical schooling as a child, teenager, young adult, you had the contrast of the classroom, the Western-style classroom with the teacher in front of the class and the students absorbing information, and then this oral tradition that you're talking about of passing down things from one generation to the next. So in that sense, it is like a language in that languages must also be passed down from someone who's a master, someone who's a native speaker, to the next generation of of people who are growing up and who will speak that language or play that musical style in their own lives. Would you say that's a fair analogy?
Yes, and just like languages differ in how they're transmitted, I think music genres differ too. It is much easier to preserve certain languages as opposed to others. It goes the same for Arabic music as opposed to other genres of music where things are a bit more documented and recordings are a bit more available as opposed to Arabic music where most of the time these resources are not available.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to be conducting a research on the creative genius of Shostakovich or Wagner, you would be embarrassed as far as how many sources of information you could pick from. If you were to be an avid Rachmaninov listener, you would find plenty of things to listen to. You would find the entire collection of his works recorded by the Concertgebouw in Amsterdam, by the L'Orchestre Symphonique de Paris, by the Staatskapelle in Berlin, by the London Symphony Orchestra.
Sure.
And if you were to be similarly interested in Mohammed Abdul-Wahab, who's just as much of a genius as Rachmaninov was, except that he was doing it for Arabic music, it would be very hard to get your hand around an entire collection of his works performed by one particular entity.
Yeah.
You might be picking up, recording from here, recording from there, recording from here, recording from there. But there are works that were not recorded ever. There are works that we don't necessarily have enough information to be able to trace them back to a particular composer or particular area or to particular, sometimes soloists. They're just recordings available out there.
Right. In language, there are a couple different ways to try and document something. The classic way is to invent a writing system and teach it to the people who still speak the language, and that way they can put their stories down on paper, put their traditions, maybe some of their knowledge down. You can translate works that they might want to read eventually, whether it's the Bible or Harry Potter, into their own language, so that way the language can be passed on to generations in the 21st century. Would you say that the same is also one way that we could help preserve an endangered music, like an endangered music tradition, by writing it down, by developing some common notation for it?
Absolutely. There are no other ways around it. Just like language needs to be spoken in order to be preserved, music has to be played, has to be performed, has to be thought, has to be passed from generation to a generation, which is happening, but it is happening at a scale where we cannot grasp all the information at once, and that leads to situations where this music is just disappearing. There is one example that I keep repeating over and over again and again, which is the classical Andalusian genre in Morocco, known as the Nawba, N-A-W-B-A. If someone were to put in my hands, as of now, all the resources I need, all the funding I need, all the equipment I need, all the information that is today is available for me to recall all these things, and gives me a decade to do so, unfortunately, I would not be able to cover more than half of what this music is, because the other half has just disappeared.
Yeah, so the Noba, that's a genre of music in Morocco or in Spain?
It's actually, it came down from Spain, and it's, with minor variations, it's available in the 3 northern African countries, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia. Okay. Each country has its own flavor to it. The Moroccan Noba was made of 24 sections, and it's a very structured music in a sense where it's divided in 24 sections. Each section has like 5 subdivisions. Each subdivision is made of 3 different rhythms. Each rhythm is made of an introduction and then a poem with a melody. And if I were to put all these things together in a big tree, some sort of an organizational chart, right, to see what is it that I would be recording, unfortunately there'll be holes here and there. Right. There'll be blanks here and there. Why? Because we'll get to this particular subdivision, I'm like, ooh, something is missing. How come we only have the lyrics for this particular part? Well, guess what? The melody used to be there at some point. It's not there anymore. Why? Because a few people who have transmitted these things for centuries and centuries, at some point there was just a break in the system, there was a failure, there was that missing link, and it was not transmitted to the next generation, and it's just gone.
Right.
I don't know how tragic I could make this sound, but it is tragic to me. It's a shame that music is just gone. Sometimes it's the lyrics that are just gone, sometimes it's the music that's gone, and sometimes they're both gone, and there's nothing available.
Yeah, it's interesting that language and music both sort of need to change gradually. We don't know why they change, but language at least changes at a rate that's very difficult to stop. But that still doesn't mean that the change of language in natural progression, a healthy language, is the same as the change of a language that's dying. So would you say that there's room for change in this tradition? Or is preservation of Arabic music going to come down to trying to limit the change as much as possible?
It's a very interesting question, also very, very controversial. I'm a purist when it comes to this music. While I do believe in the inevitability of changes and the inevitability of this music being impacted and influenced by other traditions, I do see in there, at this particular time in history, I do see that fusion as a danger to this music, because this music has not been documented properly to start with.
Okay.
So to mix it with something that is much stronger, we're not going to have a merger, we're not going to have an acquisition, literally.
Right.
And fusion music, as far as I'm concerned, is also very problematic, because when you put Indian music and Arabic music together, I'm always tempted to ask the question, so where does Arabic music stop? Where does Indian music start?
Yes.
Are we honoring both traditions, or just making a big soup of both and presenting them in something that would be more commercially acceptable?
Yes.
So for me, those changes that you mentioned are inevitable, but the priority as of now is just to preserve the pure tradition. And if it later on, if you can take the Baroque music, you can mix it whatever it is that you want. Baroque music is going to remain available for all those who would like to study it at a later stage.
Yes.
Why? Because we have scores. Composers' lives are nicely documented. Researches were done. Dissertations were written. When it comes to Arabic music, we're having trouble establishing when a gentleman died. And I'm not talking about some obscure violinist playing as a section musician in a major orchestra.
Yes.
I'm talking about a major composer in the Arab world, and the date of his death, let alone the reasons for his death or what led to his death, are still up for grab. And you'll have people who are equally knowledgeable, equally qualified to talk about that gentleman or his music, who would give you different opinions.
Do you think some of these issues that we're talking about, because I also feel, I think the same way that you do, that if you have some type of fusion, if you have some type of crossover, you're going to lose probably more than you're gaining in that fusion, in that crossover. You might make a lot of money, but it's probably going to be more financially worthwhile than it is culturally worthwhile. Do you think some of these issues also pertain to the way the world is evolving in general, or maybe even the way education has evolved in general, whereas, like, if you're going to start at the beginning of something, instead of starting even-handedly in all the cradles of civilization or at all the major points of human culture and civilization, you start maybe with the Greeks or the Romans, and you see that as the beginning of civilization, whereas other cultures, the Arab cultures, Mesoamerican cultures, Chinese cultures, they're sort of put in as an afterthought when they start interacting with Europeans, like when Marco Polo goes over, when Christopher Columbus goes over. Do you think that some of these issues would also apply to things other than music?
I don't think we're necessarily qualified to talk about other disciplines than music. But what you mentioned remains, unfortunately, very, very true when it comes to music. Why? Because it's David facing Goliath, in a sense. The winner is actually spoken for way before the fight starts.
Right.
I hate to call it a fight, but that general trend that we see, like I said, is inevitable. We used to go from fantastic chefs-d'oeuvre in Arabic music that were to last an hour and a half 34 years ago to pieces now that last 4 or 5 minutes. Why? Because we need commercial breaks. So, and I'm fine with that commodification of Arabic music and commercialization of it, as long as there is major work being done in order to preserve what's pure and traditional and loyal to the tradition. Once that being done, I'm okay with the pop movement and the pop culture kind of defacing that music. But at least there's something to deface. And if you want to go back to the original chefs-d'oeuvre, they're available.
Okay.
That's not the case, unfortunately. So what we're facing are situations where if you were, as Lee Ballard, to, let's say, come out of one of my classes or Hanna class and like, hey, I'm interested in this music. I'd like to see what it is about. And go to Amazon.com. Out of the 3,000 titles that they're offering, you are likely to be clicking till page 5, going through 20 titles per page in order to get to the first classical title.
If I were to type in something like
Arabic music. Yeah,
right.
literally. So what's going to happen, I very humbly and modestly know the difference between classical and pop. I do not expect someone who grew up in Oklahoma or Yokohama, Japan, or Paris, France, to know that difference. So by the time he clicks on Arabic music and Googles it and ends up with the first result, like, ooh, this is Arabic music. Unfortunately, what he will be listening is very, very likely to be something that kind of sounds like Arabic music, probably comes from an Arabic tradition, but is using shitload of keyboards and an orchestration that's probably going to have some harmony to it, and he's going to be listening to a commercial product.
Are you thinking of an artist like Shakira or Nancy Ashram or some of these artists?
Nancy Ashram more than Shakira. Shakira is, as far as I'm concerned, is a Latin musician. I think that's how she's being seen in the pop scene. So if she's willing to reconnect with some of her roots and play some, have some Arabic music into Arabic flavor into her tunes, I'm fine with that.
Okay. Because she's multicultural to begin with, so she would be allowed. She'd have a good reason to.
Not only that, but she's less to blame because she's actually doing an effort bringing Arabic music. Okay. Someone like Nancy Ashram is Arab.
Yes.
Born in an Arab land, with Arab parentage.
This is a Lebanese pop singer.
One among the many artists that I believe are committing a crime against this music.
Yes.
If you listen to her music, it's a very mediocre composition most of the time. Very not appealing. The lyrics are more often than not a joke. But she has nice visual assets to offer on screen, so I think that gets her some prime time on TV.
If I wanted to go to Amazon, I probably would be able to buy some of these CDs, but I wouldn't know where to start. Could you tell our listeners maybe some of the greats? If we were going to listen to, say, 5 artists, who might we want to start with?
Make sure to listen to these artists singing as opposed to their pieces being sung by someone else. Obviously, we'll have to start with Diva Kulthum, Egyptian lady who has reached some quite a few remarkable heights in terms of presenting this music.
And when is she still alive?
No, died in the 70s.
Okay.
Died in the 70s. One thing that made her who she is, besides a fantastic talent and a fantastic voice, is her ability to put out a new recording every month. And that recording was not actually put on a CD or a cassette or whatever medium they're using at the time. That recording was broadcasted live in the Arab countries. It was, I believe, the third Thursday of every month.
This was over the radio?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. She would, for a month, rehearse her ensemble. We're talking about quite a big orchestra. And on the third Thursday, don't quote me on that, I think it was the third Thursday of every month, Arab land will just get immobilized.
Yeah. And just quickly, until we move to the next artist,
okay.
What would be a typical Arabic or an Arab orchestra for an artist like Kulthum? What would we be expecting for instruments?
Quite a few instruments that belong to the actual Western orchestra, as in violins, maybe a few violas, definitely a few cellos. I think a contrabass would be present too. A major percussion section, as in maybe 4 or 5. Definitely ney, which is the bamboo flute, oud, or the lute, qanun, and I think I'm not forgetting anybody.
Yeah. So percussionists, are these percussionists playing the frame drums that I'm familiar with from our rehearsals?
It goes a bit more than that. It's you would find the 3 major Arab percussive instruments are the goblet, darbuka, the frame drum, and the tambourine, the tar, or the rik, depending what country you come from.
Okay.
And that will be just your typical tambourine with zills. And so yeah, that will be the orchestra that she'll have behind her.
Okay, great. Yeah. So Kulthum, if I was going to listen to someone else after I decided I loved that so much I want to buy some more, who might I turn to next? I'm
going to be a bit more personal here. I will definitely go for a gentleman who goes by the name of Nadhim Al-Ghazali. Nadhem will be his first name. Last name El-Ghazali. E-L space G-H-A-Z-A-L-I.
Okay.
What makes him interesting is that he sings a completely different genre. He sings what we call the Iraqi maqam. He's an Iraqi gentleman. And he also would be supported by an orchestra that would look similar, except that most of his musicians would be wearing dark shades on stage, which puzzled me when I was a kid up until I learned that they were blind. Because I just couldn't get it. Why would you wear dark shades, sunglasses on stage? Yeah. How bright were the lights?
Yeah, I guess Iraq is not that much more sunny than Morocco or
and they were
Syria.
Indoors too.
Yeah.
But I learned later on that actually his musicians were, for most of them, blind.
Oh, I see.
But he's also a master when it comes to delivering the Iraqi maqam. I think I would go for some original recordings by Abdul Wahab too, who was more of a composer than he was a singer. But you cannot go wrong with his compositions, with his songs. Okay. Some of his compositions have made it to the other side of the fence, as in started incorporating accordions and electric guitars, and he was definitely an innovator in that sense. But his songs are still very, very traditional. I like the example of Kulthum more than any other one because she sang for different composers. Arabic music is more often than not, whether it's right or wrong, based around the composers, the singer. So Kulthum, being Kulthum, was approached by many great composers of her time, and I think she worked with the best. So you could actually listen to 2 different songs because they're from 2 different decades or by 2 different composers. They'll still have that very common thread, which is Kulthum voice to them, but they'll be very different in a sense.
Yes.
Who else could we listen to? I think we could also focus on a lady who goes by the name of Fairuz. Fairuz is not exactly your typical example for a lot of reasons. She's definitely different than Fairuz.
Yeah.
She definitely stands out by compositions that were a bit more modern in terms of how the music was approached, how long the songs were, etc. But she remains someone who has done a great service for the folk repertoire of the Levantine countries, and also sang a repertoire that definitely qualifies as classical, while being a bit more modern in a sense.
Where is she from?
She's from Lebanon.
Okay.
She's still alive.
I see.
Yeah.
Great.
Abdul Wahab died in the 90s, Kulthum the 70s, Fairuz is still alive. Yeah.
All right. Now, I remember in some of our private lessons we were talking about different scales that they have in the Western world, and how these concepts of scales, modes, might not directly apply to Arabic music. In Arabic music, there's a different structure with tetrachords, and putting the tetrachords together. Is there any way to explain this difference to the casual observer, or do you have to know about music to get it?
if you were not in the context of an interview, I would have asked you to do it, because that's the best way for me to check whether my students have gotten anything out of that class or not.
Yeah.
So I'll get you on that one later on. But as far as the modal system goes, you pointed to the one major difference, which is the usage of a tetrachord, also known as jins, J-I-N-S, plural being ajnas, A-J-N-A-S-S. The tetrachord being the base of the modal system in the genre of Arabic music. A scale being nothing more than the juxtaposition of two tetrachord. The other major difference will be the usage of quarter tones. It's like having little keys of different color in between each two keys on a piano. There's a flat, there's a sharp, there's also something slightly higher than a flat and slightly lower than a sharp.
I see. So on a piano keyboard, each key is one half step, but in Arabic music, you use an interval that's half of that, so a quarter tone.
When you say half of it, that's also up for debate, but sometimes it's slightly over a half, sometimes slightly lower than a half. And there are also geographical variations, whether you're playing this Arabic music in a North African country like mine, Morocco, where we were definitely a bit more impacted by Western approach to this music, and also African traditions, or where you're doing it in Syria or Lebanon, two countries that were kind of shielded from that African influence and also heavily impacted by the Ottoman approach to music, which never made it beyond the Algerian borders, thus leaving Morocco completely outside of that sphere of influence.
I see.
So there are regional differences in between the countries, sometimes regional differences in between the genres per se, but to simplify it, I think that the major different in terms of how to approach this music is to think of a tetrachord as the basis of that music, and to think of a quarter tone as an alternative to have when it comes to the audio output.
I see. So this tradition then made its way to Morocco after the breakup of the Ottoman Empire, or when was it that Arabic music became Arabic music, or is that just an idea that doesn't really exist and we're just calling it Arabic music for convenience sake?
It's very. We're opening the door to a debate that's very hard to get around. The terminology used is not adequate depending on where you are.
Right.
What we call Arabic music is Arabic music from a certain angle. But if you take a country like Morocco, where 75% of the population is not Arab in its origins, then are we still going to call it Arabic music? Are we using the word Arabic music just because it's the Arab language, which is the only common thread that we have in between the Arab countries? Some people refer to it also as Middle Eastern music, which I can hardly identify with, because I was born about a few thousand miles from the Middle East, and there's nothing Middle Eastern about my background.
Right.
There are quite a few things that make it hard to use one word that would kind of encompass everything. And to answer your question, the Arab influence had been felt in Morocco way before the Ottoman Empire. Actually, there was no Ottoman Empire influence in Morocco. They just couldn't make it into Moroccan land. Morocco is a hard country to be invaded. Mediterranean Sea in the north, Atlantic Ocean on the west, the desertic Sahara on the south, and the Atlas Mountains on the west. Unless you're shooting from up in the air, it's hard to invade the country with an infantry or with an army. So the Ottomans, while having ruled every single Arab country and actually half the planet, or half the planet as it was known at that time, never quite made it beyond the Algerian border. Every single time they needed help, we provided. Every single time they needed slaves, we went to Africa, brought some and sold them to them. But the Ottomans never made it beyond the Algerian borders. Every single time they tried, they were kind of beaten up at the frontier. So that Ottoman Empire, that Turkish influence, that very minimal usage of the quarter tone never made it to Morocco. What we have to offer instead of that is music that is in a sense a lot more percussive. Why? Because we have a very strong African component in our population. Morocco has always been a land, a welcoming land for people who had trouble in their own. So when the slavery trade was going on between Africa and Europe, a lot of the slaves would escape during the route and actually settle in Morocco. Ended up speaking Arabic, ended up embracing Islam as their religion, ended up being a solid part of the Moroccan population. And they brought with them their heritage, they brought with them their very energetic approach to music, they brought with them their very specific rhythmic patterns. So Moroccan music, to the ears of someone from the Middle East, is a lot more percussive, has a lot more heavy rhythms to it. And you could notice it in the huge variety of percussive instrument that we have that is not available to other people in the Middle East.
I see. So these are people who settled in Morocco who had origins in sub-Saharan Africa.
True.
Who managed to avoid slavery, and they influenced Moroccan music by making more percussive.
Yep.
Oh, that's great.
And there were other influences. The Arab influence is there. The Judeo-Christian influence is there. When Jews were kicked out of Spain in the 15th century, they settled in the first land they found on their way, which is Morocco. And they brought with them all that sophisticated approach to a certain genre known as muashahat, which was not available prior to that in Morocco. So Morocco has been at the intersection of what has been and still is at the intersection of various cultures, which makes Morocco what it is culturally, and in terms of languages, and in terms of culinary arts, and in terms of the way people dress. It's just a nice mosaic of people.
Great. Last time when we were talking, I mentioned the website Florida Linguistics to you, and then I also mentioned Ethnologue, and you were telling me how much fun you had looking at it, because I knew that there were maybe 4 or 5 languages in Morocco, but it turns out, according to Ethnologue, there are somewhere like 11 languages.
Had you asked me prior of me being interested in that website how many languages exist in Morocco, I would have definitely named Arabic as an official language, French as being the language of the administration and language of business, and language of education to some extent. And I would have mentioned the 3 major dialects, Tarifit, Tamazight, and Tashlihit. Turns out there's a lot more than that. Spanish that is being spoken in the northern part of the country would have never qualified to me as a language spoken in Morocco, because I thought it was just a very small minority that uses the language that is being widely spoken on the other side of the Mediterranean Sea,
right,
which is about 9 miles
yes,
away. But it turns out that it is actually listed as a language. The Hamara language ends up being listed as a language, which is something I actually never heard about.
Wow. And what kind of language is that?
It's something being spoken by people who live in a very particular area. And shame on me, that's the area where I'm from, which is the northern part of Morocco. It's the Jibli component of the Moroccan population. Jibli meaning people from the mountains, Jibel being a mountain. And it turns out that those people have a language on their own that I just never heard of or heard about or heard, period.
And is it a Berber language, or is it?
Well, the website it's somewhere in between Arabic and Tarifit. Okay. Tarifit is language speaking in the Rif Mountains, which is a major component of the non-Arabic language in Morocco. Tarifit is still widely used. There are people who only speak Tarifit back in Morocco. The Humara language I had no idea that it existed, but it's being used by that population that has not been living far enough to the north to speak Tarifit, but not necessarily part of that elite bourgeois part of Morocco to speak classical Arabic. We're talking about a few centuries ago. So it's kind of in between.
Sure.
And it turns out that under that particular classification that we looked at, it is actually a language with its particular grammar rules, its particular flavor, its particular pronunciation. And if that language is not still being spoken, then I think someone needs to revive it.
Mm. Yeah. Do you ever see these languages written? Is there a writing system for them that you ever see on forms that you have to fill out, or signs if you go out into these down south from where you are, into these areas where their languages are spoken? Do you ever see them written down, or is it just the south?
There has been in the last, I think, 2 decades, an official step made towards recognizing these languages, as in they started being taught at school. When I was a kid, as in like little kid, there were 2 ways of getting the news in Morocco. The Arabic news flash and the French ones. I think when I was in junior high, which is quite a few years ago, they started introducing versions of the news flashes in Tamazight.
And these are news flashes on the radio or television?
No, on TV. Televised ones.
Okay.
These were not available when I was a kid. Now it's everywhere to be seen.
Okay.
The Tamazight movement in Morocco is interesting in a sense where, while we grew up in a very, very multicultural society, I think that there always has been a general understanding that Morocco is our nation. Whether you were Berber, Arab, whether you were blonde or black, whether you were Jewish or Muslim in Morocco, if the Moroccan team were to be playing the World Cup, everybody would feel sad. If they lose, everybody will be super happy and go in the streets to scream and get stupid and get drunk if they were to win. There was that general understanding that Morocco is a nation. With its multifaceted aspects, but still one nation, with one political system, with one central system. And while that seems to be a given, it has unfortunately not been the case in a neighboring country like Algeria, where the Tamazight movement, known as the Kabyle movement, has always had political aspirations, as in independence kind of aspirations or self-autonomy. That is not something that we felt in Morocco. We still don't feel it, and I sure hope that we'll never feel it, because that Moroccan anthem that we all sing, that Moroccan flag that we all pledge allegiance to, that king that we all pledge allegiance to, that central system that is there to regulate our lives, has been ours.
Right.
And it's very, once again, when you look at it like that, it seems to be a given, but it has not been the case in neighboring countries. In Morocco, it has been the case. Now, when these Tamazight movements in a neighboring country like Algeria started having these political aspirations that took streets over, that led to periods of economic, political, and just total instability in the country, as almost in a civil war, I think the Moroccan government was smart in allowing for a bit more of an overture for these languages, as in they started having their newspapers, they started having their own news flashes, their language started being taught at school, and it has definitely, I think, taken some of the heat away by allowing some of that energy to just come out in Pacific movements.
Right. So you've seen that in Morocco, it's possible to have one strong nation where everyone feels part of it. Everyone feels like they're together and they're able to contribute something to the country and to the productivity of it and to the arts and to their own lives, and they feel great about, when their soccer team were to win. But it doesn't require one language to have that strong nation. You can have many languages and still have a strong nation.
I really would like to see Morocco having those multiple languages being used. not in a chauvinistic way, not in a stupid nationalistic approach, just because it does make what Morocco is. We're capable of feeling great ecstasy listening to Moroccan Andalusian music, which is straight Arab tradition, and I could feel the same kind of ecstasy listening to Nestle Riwan, which is the which conveys a completely different genre, which conveys a completely different aspect of Moroccan social life. I would like to see that Moroccan national soccer team having people who have Arabic names and also Berber names. I'd like to see that Moroccan government having representatives from all walks of life and also all ethnicities, if I could call that an ethnicity. I'm not sure whether I'm using the proper terminology or not. But Morocco has always been that. It has always been a land where you would speak French and be understood, or you could speak Arabic and be understood. You could claim Islam as your faith and be respected for that, or claim Judaism as your faith and be respected for that. Be of a different skin color and still claim the same allegiance to the flag and see it that way. And that for me is a unique experience, because we grew up in that country capable of reading Al-Ma'arri and capable of reading Montesquieu, capable of enjoying Berber music, capable of enjoying Arabic music, capable of just feeling that unique Moroccan thread everywhere we go.
And part of preserving that uniqueness is making sure that the languages and the traditions stay around so that Morocco doesn't become boring.
Boring.
Yeah.
It is part of what we have to do. Now, is it something, the responsibility of which goes to the government or to the particular groups? I'm not sure about that. All what I know is that if all ethnic groups were to claim their differences and do it in a pacific way and do it without reaffirming any superiority towards anything, I think that multi-facet Morocco that I grew up with is there to stay.
Great.
And that for me is something that makes our society a lot richer than if we were to be one nation speaking one language where everybody is a particular skin color and worshipping the same God the same way.
All right. If you could maybe come up with a program to talk about music again, if you could maybe come up with some dream of the best way to preserve or document or teach or whatever you think it could be to preserve this Arabic music, what do you think some steps would be to make sure that it is passed on to the next generation after us?
It's not a dream for me, it's something that I live day in, day out. That explains my presence here today at UF, it explains Hanna's presence here at UF. It's, like I said earlier, in order for this music to be preserved, in order for it to be revived, there are no secrets. It needs to be played, it needs to be documented, it needs to be recorded, it needs to be taught. Right. And passed from generation to generation. And that's something that has become central to my life a few years ago. Quit my corporate job to do nothing but this. I think if there is something I'm very proud of is having surrounded myself by fantastic talents, making what we know as the Arabesque Music Ensemble. More people, a lot of people would ask me, hey, so are you guys based in Chicago? And I'll be like, Chicago is not big enough to have that much talent to it. Are you guys all from Morocco? I'm like, Morocco is not big enough to have that much talent in it. So my percussionist is from Syria, my violinist is from Israel. We've had people from Egypt, we had people from Lebanon, we had people from Tunisia, we had people from other Arab countries being part of this ensemble. And what we're doing is, in a sense, doing whatever it takes to preserve that music. I was today is our dress rehearsal before tomorrow's performance, and I could not be prouder of this ensemble. People who 5 weeks ago knew nothing about Arabic music, would not know how to play it, would not know how to listen to, would not know what it is to start with. And here we are presenting tomorrow concert. Why? Because we put a lot of efforts into putting this together. We have gotten tremendous help from the Department of Musicology here, which is something nice enough to be mentioned because it's not available everywhere. But that step forward from the Department of Musicology here at UF by allowing this 5 weeks residency for the Arabesque Music Ensemble and this performance and these classes and workshops and seminars to take place is something that has got to be applauded, because first of all it shows real dynamism from the administration, real flexibility, and it allows the Arabesque to perpetuate its mission, which is to promote this music, revive it, and make it available for other generations. There is this fantastic gentleman that performed and toured with us, who's a double bass player from California. His name is Miles J., who literally was a jazz musician, walking from one practice room to another. A few years ago, probably over a decade ago. And if Miles is listening to this, hey Miles,
we'll give him a pen.
Yeah, he and this is his story. He was walking from a practice room to another, carrying his instrument, and he was grabbed in the hallway by a gentleman who also has done tremendous job for this music, Professor Scott Marcus from UC Santa Barbara, who just like, hey, you're a bass player? And the guy's like, yeah, would you like to join us for a rehearsal? Rehearsal of what? We have an Arabic music orchestra going on. Sure, but I never played Arabic music. Well, we'll get you to play it. Most people have never played Arabic music. That was probably over a decade ago. And if it wasn't, I'm sorry, Miles, I'm making you much older than you are. But the gentleman ended up living in Cairo a few years later. He's now a touring bass player with some of the greatest oud players that we've ever had in the Arab land, Professor Nasser Shamma. And the story is very simple in the sense, but it's also very telling. You never know how it goes. This is a guy, I'm talking about a 6 foot tall, long hair surfer from California who's playing in a jazz ensemble. And now he's touring with Nasser Shamma, which is a tremendous prestige, but he's not there because he looks good on stage. He's there because he's a damn freaking good bass player. And he just embraced that music. Next thing I knew, he was living in Cairo. I'm like, what?
He just fell in love with the genre.
Yeah, and I would also like to bring another anecdote to your listeners. When a few weeks ago, I think you and I were just hanging out by the elevator, and you just grabbed that lady, Amy, like, hey, we're having an Arabic music orchestra at you. I'm like, what? Yeah, we're having something going on. And that's how interests get, started. And you never know how this might end up.
Right. This was a friend of mine from the orchestra, Amy, and I saw her, and she had said, "Oh, well, I'd wanted to come to a few rehearsals, but I just never made it around because I was doing something different." And I said, "Well, maybe you should come anyway. You should think about coming." She's like, "I would like to." And then you just walk past. Hicham walks past, and she said, "Well, should I come?" And he said, "Yeah, you should come." And it was great.
Yeah, because once again, and this is the challenge for people like me and Hanna, or Hafiz or Kinan.
This is Hanna Khoury, the violinist from Israel you mentioned.
Hanna Khoury is really unique talent when it comes to this music. There are multiple things I could say about many of my musicians. I could use whatever adjectives or superlatives for him, but he's someone whose background is so unique that I could not see but a bright future for him. Someone who grew up in a very rigorous, disciplined Israeli school of music, playing Western classical music, where he developed his chops for violin. Yet he's an Arab by ethnicity. He's a native. He grew up with Arabic music, and he definitely developed that feeling for it. So you put the feelings with the chops, and you end up having a fantastic musician. Those who have known me for a few years would definitely tell you that Hicham has sometimes trouble delegating tasks. When I saw Hanna, I knew exactly that I'm not going to be running one rehearsal going forward with this ensemble, because he had everything to do it. So he's with us here today for this 5 weeks residency here at UF, and we have done quite a few things like that. He's developing something similar in Philadelphia. We're having an upcoming workshop at University of Michigan in Kalamazoo. This is something that we are doing full time. This is something that very selfishly we do because we like, but also we're doing it because it accomplishes something. It leads to something. It's something that is not just going down the chute. Here we are with. It started with you coming to rehearsal. Here am I doing a whole podcast on Arabic music. I've seen people who came to the first rehearsal as in, yeah, I'll see what this is about. And 5 weeks later, they're playing, 4 or 5 minutes takasim with gazillion modulations in them. So I'm the first one to be amazed and impressed.
Yeah. Takasim are the improvisational solos that begin some of the songs that were some of the pieces.
They could either begin some of the songs. It could also be standalone improvisations. They could also be played in the middle of a piece. So takasim is nothing else but an improv. It could be done over a beat pattern. It could be done totally freestyle. But it's really something that requires a bit more than a technical ability. It does require a thorough knowledge of what you're doing. It also requires some sort of familiarity with the modal system.
Because the modulations you mentioned, right? So when you go from one mode to another mode, that's the modulation.
And then to a third mode and to a fourth, and try to find your way back to the initial one. And in order to do that, there is a bit more of learning that needs to be done. A lot of phrasing that needs to be done properly. And for me to see someone who goes by the name of Heston playing one on a cello, or see someone by the name of Olga Godula from Poland playing that, or Chris Witolski from northern New York doing something like that is very soothing. It gives me a great sense of appreciation for what I'm doing, and once again, if I could contribute, even in a very modest way, anything to preserving, promoting, reviving this music, then I think I'm doing the best I can.
Oh, great. Where do you see this music in 20 years?
It depends on a lot of factors. I could multiply Hanna's efforts by a factor of 10. I could multiply my efforts by a factor of 10. I think ultimately it would definitely require some sort of collective wisdom by our government to direct some more funding towards that. When I see that the Qatari government has the means to fund an entire orchestra, symphony orchestra, made of Eastern European musicians.
This is a Western orchestra, right?
Yeah, it's called the Qatar Symphony Orchestra. It's an orchestra with 70 positions, 70 full-time salaries with benefits. We're talking about tons of money. I don't know what the budget is, but quick math, and we're in the
millions of dollars.
Yeah, probably in the 2 digits. When I see that there is this much funds directed towards something that is totally unnecessary, my heart bleeds a bit, because on the other hand, I see the traditional Qatari Bedouin music being confined to being played in festivals for tourists from Tokyo snapping pictures.
Yeah.
And it's turning onto a commercial offering touristic offering as opposed to anything else. And it's a disgrace. It is a disgrace, because funding that symphony orchestra is, let's call it what it is, just plain stupid.
Yeah.
These musicians are far from being, top-notch musicians. I highly doubt that an orchestra based in Qatar would anytime soon be good enough to create a rivalry with I don't know, l'Orchestre Symphonique de Paris or the Stage-Capelle or
and that's an
La
island
Scala or
Qatar is an island in the Persian Gulf, right?
It's an Arab country.
Next to the United Arab Emirates. It has
Yeah.
nothing to do with Europe, no connection.
So there's a lot of reasons that I could use as far as why we're in the shitty situation we're at right now. The predominance of verbal tradition is one. I could name a few that were, kind of justifiable to some extent, but to see millions of dollars going towards funding something like that, as opposed to funding something that is a lot more, that should be a lot more on top of the priority list, I think it's just plain stupid.
Yeah.
There's no other ways to call it. The rampant commercialization is bad, but I could kind of see why it's happening. The fusion movement is bad, but I see kind of why it's happening. The oral tradition, I see how it's damaging to the music, but I can understand where it's coming from in terms of how these societies have evolved. To see this much funding going towards something like that is not justifiable, and I think it's just a waste. It's literally throwing money out the window.
Yeah. Well, we'll put our efforts into making Arabic music for now.
UF has done great, and it is my understanding these efforts would continue in the future, and for that, I'm personally very, very grateful.
Great. And so, just right as we close, the website for the Arabesque Ensemble is?
ArabesqueMusicEnsemble.com.
Okay, ArabesqueMusicEnsemble.com.
Yep.
We'll all check it out.
In there, you'll find plenty of videos to watch, plenty of audio excerpts to listen to, CDs to buy, and if you have interest in the musicians and their bios, there's plenty in there. What else could they have? Plenty of press clips, and just whatever information needed in order to invite this ensemble to perform or conduct a workshop or a seminar.
Great, and we'll make sure to listen to Kulthum and these other artists.
That would be great.
By buying their music on Amazon, now that we know where to go. I'll give you this pen. You can either keep it or give it to Miles. This has been Lee Ballard and Hicham Chami for FloridaLinguistics.com. Please visit the website for an archive of the podcast episodes, general information about linguistics, and a way to get in touch. Thanks for listening, and see you again soon.
Florida Linguistics.